Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The regular meeting of the Grosse Ile Township Planning Commission will come to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda, additions and/or deletions to the agenda. I have one addition I would like to make. It's actually a new number 1 under discussion items. I have some population and housing data that I'd like to present to the commission. So I'd like that to be item 1, and number 2, review of the master plan implementation items is number 2, if that's acceptable.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
We have a motion to approve as revised. Support from Rathel. Mr. Rathel. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda is revised. Next item is meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve them as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes from November the 4th as submitted. Second? Support from Jay. Call the question. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Very good. Next item is public comment. An opportunity for citizens to speak about any item not on our agenda. Welcome. A
Hello,
familiar
everybody.
face.
Nice to be here on this side.
Kyle, good to see you, sir.
3 things for items not on the agenda. My name is Kyle DeBose. I live on West River Road. First, I believe it was Kevin Flavin's idea to make commission packets available to the public online. So I know it might take some time, but I just wanted to add my personal voice of support for that as someone who will now be a resident and will be following this commission's work very closely. I'd be very happy to be able to review that stuff online if possible. Might cause a little bit of extra work, but I just wanted to put my support in for that. I also just wanted to say a thank you to the Planning Commission. It was a real pleasure to serve alongside you all. I think you all know this, but I just want to state it. The work you all did here has already had a huge impact, especially through the master planning process. It was cited many times, the feedback that was got through the master plan process as a reason to pursue the bridge purchase. Obviously went through, and it's a huge thing, multi-generation vote that the island took, and once in a multi-generation type thing. So just a huge thing that I think the Planning Commission has already done. And the main announcement I wanted to make tonight, I won't be able to be here on Monday as I'll be traveling, is we know that bridge will be shut down in the springtime, and whether we like it or not, that will cause hardship for some islanders. Not everyone's able to deal with that sort of hardship. And I wanted to especially plug the Grosse Ile Goodfellows as something that we all think about during that time, especially this time of the holidays. They've sent out the mailer to everyone, and they're just one of the best institutions, I think, on this island to take care of folks that might suffer through some hardship as that bridge closes. So that was the main thing that I wanted to say in the public comment tonight. So thank you.
Well, Kyle, on behalf of the Planning Commission, let me say that it was a pleasure to have you up here, and we really appreciate your service to the community.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Ross, as far as the idea of the packages being put online, I think that's something you're going to need to discuss with Bill Heil, our new liaison.
Yeah, I've uploaded our packet tonight on the portal, so it should be up there. It's on the commission page for Planning Commission. Anyone can click in there and see what we're looking at.
Okay,
tonight,
so this is a done deal.
Yep.
Very good. I didn't know that. Already I learned something tonight. How about that? Okay, very good. Well, let's move to the next item, which is a bit of a discussion about data. I did some analysis for the purposes of simply making sure that we as a commission were all fully grounded in exactly where as a community we are. When you're taking a journey to go somewhere, it's always good to know what your starting point is. And I felt that perhaps a little more data and a little more analysis might be useful, and so I put some materials together. I had an opportunity to review it I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago with Derek Teal and with Ross and with Brian. And we went through a number of things. Subsequent to that, I took what was a lot of analysis and kind of distilled it down into things that I thought could be managed in a meeting here. And it's just 4 or 5 pages, primarily driven by graphs. And so, how this directly interacts with our direction on the master plan is subject to opinion. And that's why I want to get it out here. And so everybody can look at it, and the answer may be it has no bearing at all, or it has some bearing, and if so, what that bearing might be. So let's kind of get into this, and we'll run through it. The first thing I did was look at a population analysis. The goal was to quantify the net population change from births, migration, and deaths between 2010 and 2020. What you see on the screen right now is the standard comparison of the census between 2010 and 2020. Now, this doesn't look quite the same as what the material is in the master plan, because I consolidated some of the blocks. So instead of having a less than 5 and then a 5 to 9, I have a less than 10. So, it makes it a little easier to see what you've got there. But what this shows is how the population in total changed from 2010 to 2020. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. If in this 10-year period there were no births, there were no migration in or out of the island, and there were no deaths, then the 2020 census would look exactly like the 2010 census, except shifted over 10 years. However, when you look at the data from the graph that was just up there, that's not the case. And so what this calculation will show is what is the effect of those 3 factors: births, migration, and deaths, taking out the shifting of the ages by 10 years. And so if you slide down a little bit now, this is what you get. You find out that in less than 10, that we had a net migration and birth increase of 1,080 youth. In the 10 to 19 area, we had an increase of 200. Now, when you get to the 20 to 29 category, we're down 950. You can see between 30 and 59, we actually had a net increase in the island. In this case, this is migration. A net migration of people coming onto the island. Now, when you get to 60, look what happens. Okay, people are leaving, people are dying. So if you look out at the greater than 80, for example, minus 790, that is the loss of that age group through those 2 factors. But if you slide back up and you look at the previous chart, you would not be able to discern that. So what this is saying is that, in effect, the people that we are attracting to the island, okay, go on down again, please, okay, are in the age group of 30 to 59, a net migration in, and presumably with those people come some or most of the youth coming in between the less than 10 and 10 to 19 categories. And obviously when you get out past 60, the other factors come into play, and the population drops drastically. The migration and deaths take a toll. But the big, one of the takeaways here is in the 20 to 29 group, where that's the college age people, leaving. And so there's a large net decrease. So I'll stop talking on this now and see if there are any thoughts or questions about this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, I'm pretty sure I'm following what you're saying. I just want to make sure that I'm following it, because I think there's a something that's maybe not explained here, but I think you said it, but it's not easy to follow. So I think what you're saying is, if we took, for example, the blue line in the top chart for the under 10,
Yep.
that's at roughly 1,000, give or take, a little bit less, it looks like maybe.
Yep.
And then to hold steady with your concept that if we just shifted it 10 years, that blue line would be the orange line in the 10 to 19.
Correct.
But it's not. That number is larger by roughly 200, which is what your chart shows below.
Correct.
And I guess the 1,080 in the under 10 in the lower chart, sorry, Ross, you're doing a good job of following me here. The 1,080, that has got to be all ads because there were no less
Correct.
than zero.
Exactly right.
Okay.
And those ads could either be births, or they could be people moving on the island with children under
Hey,
10.
I'm sorry, say that again, what you just said there.
So the just the 1,080 or the whole thing?
1080.
Yeah, so the 1,080 is saying that there are 1,080 more than we would have expected from just a shift
Right,
over 10 years because there were none of those kids alive
okay,
in 2010. So that would say that there are 1,080 kids under 10 in the 2020 census.
okay. So does that then, is that the cause or the effect of the 30 to 59-year-olds increasing like it did, bringing those kids in? Is that the connection there?
Well, I think the 1,080 is hard to, kind of put against anything because there's no kind of built-in expectation of what that number is going to be. But I would say this, if you look at the growth in under 10 from 2010 to 2020,
Yes,
so it goes from roughly 1,000 to
right,
probably 1,080. That would be attributed to either further births from those higher age groups or those higher age groups moving in and bringing children with them.
right, which makes sense from the fact that we had we had 200 from 10 to 19, but from 30 to 59, we had a big growth. And it looks like they either had children or brought children with them. Is that reasonable to say?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, because what if you just look at the top chart, and I think this is the really the genius of what John has done here, not
I
to
wouldn't go that far.
not to kiss up to the chair, but if you just looked at the top chart, I think it suggests we're losing people in the
Right.
40 to 50 to 60
Right.
to 70, that
Right.
sort of age range,
Right.
40 to 60 age range. But if you actually look, there are more people moving in that age range than moving out in that age range.
Yes. Okay.
Can I double click on that a little bit too? Because I think then looking at that then what you're assuming, or what I'm suggesting or gathering from the numbers is that those homeowners, like we'll just even say 40 to 59, moved into those home losses that were made available by the decrease in age 70 to 80 plus, right? So assuming the 70 to 80 plus migrated or moved out or passed away, then those homes were quote unquote made available for these households.
Yeah, that is a good assumption because the actual population between 2010 and 2020 only changed by like 300.
Correct.
So it's
okay.
so yeah, pretty much what you're saying is correct.
Yep.
So this says something about our housing and what it is what groups are being attracted to grow seal. So any other comments on that? If not, let's move on to the second group of bits of information. This is information I got from Tim O'Donnell, our assessor. And I wanted to document the relative land costs on Grosse Ile versus other communities. What we did was I asked him to pull off the estimated land market value in dollars per square foot for properties that are internal to the island. They're not on the canal. They're not on the water. There's nothing extraordinary. It's the standard lots on Grosse Ile. And what he gave were a standard R1B lot, a lot on Bellevue, an R1D lot, a Macomb commercial lot, Macomb residential lot, and then the numbered lots on Bellevue. And what you see, the line that you see that is labeled Grosse Ile is the breakdown in terms of lot area versus the land value in dollars per square foot. So you can see out around 20,000 square feet, there is a land value of around $5. When you get all the way to the other extreme, Bellevue numbered lot, that's at about $8.22, and then lot size is small. Well, how does that compare with the other communities? Well, you look at Wyandotte, and Wyandotte with their standard 5,000 square foot lot, they're at $4.49. Trenton Riverview has a little bit bigger lots, and they're at $4.17 a square foot. Flat Rock, you can't really count because they don't have small lots. What they have is acreage. But that's why they're so low at $2.73. But, you know, there was a comment in the master plan about the fact that we are a very wealthy community. In some respects we are. But you look at our land value versus Grosse Pointe Shores and Grosse Pointe Farms, and they're almost double or even triple what we are. So, you know, we're certainly more wealthy in comparison to our immediate neighbors, but in the big scheme of things, maybe not so much. If you slide down a little bit, these are the things that you can conclude. Our interior land values are higher than our adjacent communities on comparably sized lots, and this reflects the high demand to live on the island. We're 85% higher than Wyandotte, 114% higher than Flat Rock, and 50% higher than Trenton and Riverview. This is just basically the land value itself, nothing else. Okay, and as I indicated, we're 56% less than Grosse Pointe Farms and 60% less than Grosse Pointe Shores. And so, now, you know, one of the things that we were trying to get to here is you know, we want to make Grosse Ile competitive with adjacent communities, but that's pretty tough when you're trying to attract lower income first-time buyers, even with small homes on smaller lots. Because even on the smallest lots, the land differential between us and a Wyandotte and us and a Trenton or a Riverview is still there. So this is an impediment to being able to encourage lower income first-time people to come to the island. Comments on that?
I'd like to start. A quick question. So we're comparing, so I would suggest where we look at Bellevue numbered and Macomb residential, I would also suggest that that's because that's quite limited. So Wyandotte has a vast number of homes available at that low square footage lot area. We do not. So those few homes that we do have available are going to drive the value at supply and demand. Secondly, I need to understand better the comment you made about Flat Rock acreage. That's inaccurate. Flat Rock is largely made up of trailer parks and subdivisions, new and older. There are some acreage homes, but largely and on average, that's not the case in Flat Rock. I know Flat Rock very well. So I'd like to double click on that assumption, if that was from something that Tim suggested, or.
Yeah, this was all information that Tim pulled together for me.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest that's probably more of the result of the the diversity of homes that are available in Flat Rock, because it's everything from acreage to trailer parks and everything in between, new and older community, or new and older subdivisions. Do we have an average that we can look at for Grosse Ile? I know we have it broken out by locations, but what is the actual, like, specific average like we have for these other communities? Do we have that anywhere?
Well, I'll tell you what, let's keep on going.
Okay.
And see if subsequent slides might answer that question. Okay. This next is looking at specifically as-is housing assessments. And in this case, the question I'm asking is, how did the median lot area change by the decade it was constructed? So basically, how big are the lots depending upon when it was built? And these are the medians. And median means that if you have 100 samples, this is number 50. It's not the mathematical average, it's number 50 out of 100. So that's what a median means. And so you can see prior to 1950, the median value was around 20,379. And in that era, that would have been R1A lots and R1C lots. Those were the prominent zoning districts back in that era. Now you're going from 50 to 59, falls a little bit to 19. And then in 1960 to 99, you see the average is between 16,300 all the way up to about 18,000, give or take. Okay, what happened there? What happened there was R1B. R1B zoning district, 16,000 square foot lots. So there are a lot of homes built on this size lot. Now when you get to 1990, you do start to see an increase leading to 2000, and on past that. Well, what happened then? What happened then was basically the R1D lots with a 20,000 square foot standard. It came in the late 1980s. Subdivisions that were approved in the 1990s got built over time. And so the lot sizes were substantially higher, a big jump. This is not due to R1E. There were no R1E subdivisions built. They were all R1D in this time span. So when I look at this, there were roughly, I'm thinking about R1B, there are 3,400 homes built between 1960 and 1999 with 16,800 square foot median lot area average. That means that basically 1,700 of those lots, okay, are less than the median value. And by the Grosse Ile definition, are small lots. So we have a distribution. Okay, we're not all entirely gigantic lot sizes. We have a mix, and there's a whole lot of homes here that are in our standard normal neighborhood R1B type housing. Questions on that? Let's move on. Okay, now let's look at the floor area of houses built. How did the median floor area change by the decade constructed? Okay, again, looking out at before 1950, roughly 1,800 square feet. You can see what happens as time passes. Again, when you get to the 1960s, you get a jump. The R1B housing coming in, all the way out to the 1990s, and then finally out to 2000, where the home sizes get drastically bigger. So the median floor area increased from roughly 1,775 square feet for homes constructed in the 50s, all the way out to 3,100 in the 2000s. You know, a lot of that is, as I would assume, is simply the style of house and what people want. And they have a bigger lot to put it on, and so they build a bigger house. And again, looking at the homes between the 1950s and the 1980s, there are 1,700 or so that are below 2,000 square feet. And that's 40% of our housing stock. And these would be in the R1B, R1C, R1F, R2, and R3, and Macomb zoning districts. So it's across the board. Comments on that? You know, the bottom line on this is that we're not all big lots. Secondly, we're not all big houses. So let's move on to the last slide. How does the median appraised value of land and houses change by decade? And here you can see, again, the basic value of the houses and the land as they are assessed. And you can see, you know, even in the 1950s, the median value is somewhere close to $300,000. And that just climbs steadily all the way up to what you see in the 2000s. But the key point here is that when you look again in the 1950s to 1960s to 1980s, you know, the R1B lots, the 1,700 lots that are out there and 1,700 homes, you're going to be at $300,000 on average for the median value. Now, half will be less than that. The other half will be more than that. So there is a mix of lot sizes, there's a mix of housing sizes, and there's a mix of property value. But, you know, we are not, the perception is we're one size fits all, and we're not. Okay, we have a variety of things on the island, from small to large. Small lot to large lot, small house to large lot. And I think we need to kind of keep that in mind. But unfortunately, the other part that goes with this is, even though you have the small to large, the bottom line is we are simply more expensive here than on our adjacent communities, just simply in the land value alone. So, comments on that? Any thoughts?
John, in general, thoughts about this, or
What's that?
in general, as it relates to what you presented, or
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
the most recent slide? So, thoughts about the most recent slide, or in general?
In general.
Yeah, well, I mean, for my take on this, obviously, what you just did, and I think Jay said it was genius. But it might be genius, Jay, but I'm going to say it's analytics, right? And what you did is you broke it out. And I think one of the more telling concepts of this is that when you talk about there are 1,700 homes built between the 50s and the 80s that have a square footage or a floor value of less than 2,000 square feet, the perception when you read this master plan is there's nothing like that available on Grosse Ile. And those that have walked the island, those that have been on the island, can go up and down certain streets and find properties that have less than 2,000 square feet. So what you did is you basically pulled out the analytics and working with the assessor. I appreciate the fact that you did it, because I think a lot of this master plan should be predicated upon analytics versus just an assumption. So those are my comments for right now.
One comment I wanted to make was, you know, I think from this data, also other data that I've seen, it kind of shows, you know, not necessarily if we were to make smaller lots, and put 1,500 square foot houses on them, are we going to get properties that are going to attract people that are in their 20s and 30s? Because even if it's a smaller lot with a 1,500 square foot house, it's still going to be more money than what our neighboring communities like Wyandotte or Trenton is. It's not necessarily going to attract people in their 20s and 30s.
That is certainly a conclusion that I drew.
I'll jump in with some comments in general as well. I think tagging onto your comment, Dan, I think some of the points that were made earlier in the master plan process wasn't at all that these types of properties were not available in Groseal. It was that these types of properties that are available in Groseal are largely outdated, or if the homes are smaller, they're still on large lots, and people in those age groups are very busy. They typically are two income households, and they have children, and they're keeping busy with travel, sports, and things like that. They don't want to, nor can they take the time to, keep up those types of homes. It's just largely unpopular right now. So much like, during the past 10 years when things shifted, they've shifted again. And I would also suggest this is up through 2020. We all know, sitting in this room, how much things changed in 2020 and how much they've continued to change. More people are working in their homes. They require different types of uses and different types of capacities in those homes and in those residential areas. So while I appreciate the data, I don't think there are any surprises here. I did sit through the school master plan strategy meetings, and we talked about this type of information ad nauseum, and really these are similar conclusions. I think also we need to keep in mind that the state of Michigan and Wayne County specifically are losing population. So while we've been able to maintain the same number of households over the last 10 years, just in general, we're going to have to try a little bit harder, statistically speaking, moving forward to keep our piece of the county and the state pie. I still am not quite sure that the dollar values spoke specifically to the land value for Groseal. I really would like to see that average dollar number. I'm just out of curiosity, not for any point other than just to understand the nuances of that chart. It would be great to have the one specific average for Groseal. So I appreciate the presentation and the amount of work put into this, John, because I do think it's all very important. But again, I just want to make sure that I reiterate what we talked about earlier in the master plan was never that there were not these types of homes available. It was very much that those homes that are of that size are typically very outdated, so they require a cost on top of getting into the home, as well as the upkeep of the larger lot sizes as a pediment. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Well, the key question is are we able to build houses on small lot sizes that are going to attract that 20-something age group?
Right, and
I would suggest the 20-something age group as well as the 30 to 38. Speaking on behalf of just thinking the school district and the businesses on Macomb Street, we also need to think about that active population that will stay and continue to be active and in and around the community and provide those dollar value increases as well. But that's just my suggestion.
Eric, any thoughts?
No, nothing that's new. The only piece of data I think that would be interesting is if we had a plot of how many houses are in each square footage area, right? So when we looked at your first data and concluded, okay, well there's people moving in, people dying, you'd be interested to see if the number of houses is matches the data, which I think it does, right? And your 1080, it's mostly probably in the 30 to 39, maybe a couple of the 40 people that are having kids. So if you 2 to 3 kids per family, that number seems to box pretty well. So it is an interesting data analysis. I think it would be interesting to see, again, by square footage, how many houses do we have? What is our housing stock? But I do agree with Angela. One of the issues, I moved in a couple different houses in the island, and every single one of them was outdated.
Apparently Eric's looking ahead. Some of the next charts, I think, go to some of that. I do worry, and I again, I want to just keep to the data, but I do, worry about, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, the there are a significant number of homes in that kind of 1,500 to 2,000 square foot range, right? And as the first chart showed with the kind of the it wasn't the first chart, it was the second page that had the red line that showed kind of the where Grosse Ile falls, and I would be interested to kind of fill in some of the gaps to make sure that it does kind of follow that line, but that line seems to make some good sense. And the issue is that if we want to create more housing in that smaller size range, or what really is pretty close to an average size range or a median size range on the island, there are a lot of people that live in those homes today, and those are the outdated homes that have these values. And so if we want to create a whole bunch of new, cheaper housing in that size range, what are we doing to the property values of those people who own those homes today? I worry about that if we're thinking about what's best for the future of the island, I want to make sure we're also thinking about what's best for the current residents of the island.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Rathel, any comments?
Yes. I'm kind of just concentrating on the first 2 pages here, and I just want to start out with a comment from the second page. So if we look at where we're at with the estimated land market value in square foot, and we are firmly ahead of Wyandotte, Trenton, Riverview, Flat Rock, all the surrounding communities. If our master plan is implemented and whatever it says brings our property value in line, the market land market value with Wyandotte, Riverview, Trenton, Flat Rock, it failed. That should not be our goal. Our goal should be that we have something that is unique, more exclusive, and keep the characteristics of Grosse Ile and who we are. I don't think it is our intent, it's not my intent, to bring a housing stock that makes it competitive in a price sense of equal or competitive to these other communities. So that's number one. On the front page, the 2 areas here, 20 to 29, and we lost people. I'm not so sure that we're a community that wants to figure out how we can market the 20 to 29-year-olds in general. Okay, I would have loved to live here when I was 20 to 29. I couldn't afford it. I moved here when I could. And the same, well, my kids grew up here, but they moved off, and then actually my youngest daughter, her first house was here, our oldest daughter, but I think that people move off, they mature, they get jobs, and then they come back. So I think that if we have any part of this master plan that addresses to try to figure out how to get 20 and 29-year-olds here to be able to afford houses, that it failed. The other side is the 60 to 79. And Angela is correct. If you look at wanting to downsize and you try to find a house, it's next to impossible. And if you do find one, you're going to have to put a lot of money into it. And I know that to be a fact because that's exactly what my wife and I did. We found a 2-bedroom house, and we had to put a whole bunch of money into it. And if we look at that age from 60 to 79, where we're down almost almost 500 people, why, right? We can say the 80 over, okay, we had some deaths in there and so on. But did these people move off the island because there was no housing stock for them? They didn't want their house, they didn't want to maintain it, and they just moved because there was no houses available. And I have advocated for a long time that we do need opportunities for the baby boomers to be able to downsize, but not downgrade, right? And that's a lot different in a goal of the master plan to develop homes for an age group like that than to build a bunch of cheap homes somewhere to attract 20 to 29-year-olds. The thing is, though, when you look at the ordinances that are involved to make that happen, how do you distinguish a home that is, for a 20, 29-year-old or a 60 to 70-year-old, right? Is it multifamily opportunities? Is it a community development somewhere on a piece of land that, it's available? I don't know. But I think that that's an important part of our future, to be able to keep these 60 to 79-year-olds here. And the last comment that I'd like to make is, I think from this commission's standpoint, we have to be able to deal with facts, and the analytics is what Kurt said this is. We all have to kind of be on the same page with it. So I don't know if it's appropriate, but I'm certainly willing to say, hey, this is a document that this commission has to turn to look at its final recommendation to the board. Does it address these numbers? Because these numbers are correct. They're not somebody's opinion, right? They came from Tim, looked at it. So I don't want you to do this and just throw it out. I'd like to have something official where we say this is the document that we look at. Does anything that we recommend to the township board fit using common sense as compared to this document? And I'm not sure how to do that, but I wanted to throw that out.
Thank you, John. Kurt, further thoughts?
Yeah, just to address something that John said, when you take a look at the population that's potentially having to downsize or move somewhere else, one of the things, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but when I take a look at the master plan that's been proposed, one of the questions was, what are the biggest concerns regarding housing in Grosse Ile? And if I calculate this right, they had roughly 1,300 people. 56% of the people said cost of taxes and cost of utilities. Only 5% said not enough housing to meet the demand. So I think we have to take into consideration, it's not just zoning, it's not just the houses that we have or potentially could build. The taxes on the island aren't cheap, and the utilities aren't cheap, right? So if you're on a fixed income, or maybe you're a widow or a widower, and you don't have a lot of money in the bank, the taxes on the island are not cheap, right? So again, we're talking about housing, we're talking about mortality, we're talking about all these things, but per that survey, 56% of the people said taxes and utilities are the biggest problems with housing on Grosse Ile, right? Well, that we need to make that part of this discussion as well. It's not just what you build and what you live in, it's what it's going to cost, and not just to pay the contractor to build it. Right now, we just passed, was it a 30-year bond for the, that's on that tax bill for 30 years. I hope we're all around. Well, Ross, you're going to be around in 30 years, but I hope most of us are still around in 30 years. But that's a huge thing that seniors have to take in consideration, is whether or not they can afford to stay on Grosse Ile based upon the taxes and utilities. So, but I like John's idea, and maybe through Brian or Ross, how do you take what you put together, these charts that are analytically driven, so that they can be used as a tool down the road when we're talking about the master plan and trying to implement some of these ideas.
Yeah, I think when we first went through this master plan process, we said we wanted to find ways to accommodate housing for folks to age in place and to attract younger families. Because we kind of had this sense through the schools that we had declining enrollment, and we had through the community development department and the building department that, folks wanted to move to smaller homes. Just this year alone, we've had 5 people come and meet with me and Brian to figure out ways that they could build on Macomb Street. I know somebody working at, at the township where they know for a fact that their neighbor has an accessory dwelling unit, and that's not legal. But so people are, whether legally or illegally, trying to accommodate this type of housing. So I think that when you see, especially the 60 to 80, or maybe the 60 to 79 age group, it seems insignificant, but when you hear from the folks who want to stay on this island, who enjoy being here, don't want to leave, I think that you can find, and we're not talking about housing, on Thoroughfare Canal, right? We're talking about potentially some small development at the airport where there's vacant land, and some mixed-use style housing on Macomb Street. We're built out. I mean, we're a built-out community. There's really very little where we can go. But if we can find a way to accommodate some of these older folks who want to age in place, while at the same time, hey, if a young family wants to move in that same sort of style house, let the market decide, right? And I think that some of the recommendations from this plan, I think it mentioned like 220 homes is what the demand is, and that's over a 20-year period. So when we're talking about 220 additional homes over the course of 20 years or so, I mean, that's really not a whole lot of, that's not an overwhelming amount of growth. And I think talking with John, in the 2002 master plan, they projected that would be at 12,000 people right now, and that we could still be sustainable. And we're at 10,700. So in terms of, can the infrastructure handle it? Can the bridges handle it? Can the sewage, we just updated the water treatment plant. The infrastructure can handle a little bit of gentle density, gentle growth, if it's calculated, if it makes sense. And, if we, accommodate that by adding some smaller lots at the airport, I mean, I think that, or allowing somebody to legally build an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard to have their grandmother or their step parents or whoever to live with them as they age and move on. I think that that's a way that we can accommodate. We can accommodate that sort of growth. So,
Mr. Chair, so when you were talking, I was thinking, so outside of an accessory dwelling, and we're far down this path, okay? This isn't something that, we'll wait and see. We need to change any of our ordinances? Do we need maybe a minor tweak like that, or,
Yep.
are we at the point where we can say now that looking at all the data and all the input and all the opportunities that we have available to build, and you said we're built out, I'm hearing that we're good, we're fine. Maybe accessory dwelling, which could make sense, right? And, but other than that, at this point, am I hearing you recommend that we don't do much of anything with our ordinances?
I didn't take it that way. I didn't.
Necessarily take, not immediately. It takes time, right? Talking with Brian, if we approve this master plan as it is today, nothing changes. There's still a tremendous amount of further analysis that goes into any sort of zoning changes in the future.
But if we implement it, we're not making any changes, and we move along real nice, and it's in alignment with the master plan, and when something comes up later, we can review it again, and as long as our review is consistent with the master plan.
But I think isn't that what we're discussing today, is that we need to, in the master plan, we need to enable those future decisions and discussions. So right now, we currently inhibit that type of growth for the smaller accessible types of homes. So like what you were referring to, John, we can't currently make that available to the 60 to 79-year-olds based on how we are currently presenting the ordinances, right? So the master plan will allow us to have more flexibility. The way it's written today, it'll allow us to have more flexibility to add in those accessory dwelling homes, to add in Macomb Street, I don't know how you refer to it, small
Mixed
density,
use.
mixed use.
Yep.
but we need to approve, or we need to, move forward with the master plan with some of the terms as it's written. We can't, today, we couldn't grow that
But we
way.
look at, okay, the mixed use on Macomb Street. Okay, I mean, that's a fair argument, and one that I'd probably buy into, because any development on Macomb Street that brings some residential, more people walking up and down it is a good thing, right? Every community is doing it, right? A lot of communities around us, okay, are doing it, and we haven't. So that's kind of one, Angela, for sure. When we look at accessory dwellings, okay, I can go along with that. I don't think that there's a lot of opportunities in large numbers for island residents to build another home in their backyard, right? But there's opportunities to do that. That could address some of the age in place kind of scenarios.
I think one thing's missed with the accessory dwellings is that you can simply add on to your house and accommodate grandma, or accommodate your a child who's 25 and coming back from college. Simply has to be attached. As an architect, I've already designed spaces like that in houses. Yeah, you can't have it. Yeah, there's one caveat: you can't have it detached, but you can have it attached.
Yeah, and there's there's opportunities to do it. I can tell you one opportunity that does not exist to do that is my house. Okay. So, I'm on, 2.5 acres, and I have a house, and, there's not going to be anything added to it, right? You can't add it to it just from an architectural standpoint, right?
Another point to that, they also call them in-law suites. So even though you do love your in-laws, you'd rather have them detached from the home.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not in the same house.
But
Saying about your
no,
future
I know.
house.
I'm very
on the record.
I'm very happy.
But let's go to the elephant in the room that has been talked about here for a long time, and that is R1E. Okay, is R1E the solution to allowing all these developments of smaller homes for the younger generation? And I'm hearing no. I was open to that. I mean, I was for sure open to looking at the R1E and seeing how that affects where we're at. But I'm hearing that that's not going to affect where we're at, or if it is, it's not going to affect us positively, right?
I think what the master plan recommends with R1E too is to amend it to meet the resiliency needs of the island. Like as we continue to analyze, especially with something like the airport, right? If we were, to split, that section of land right next to Meridian, and if we were to split that and make a development, that would then fall to R1E standards, right? So I think that when you look at something like that, do we bring back the PUD, the plan unit development style? Mr. Chairman Schweikert, in the was it the 90s or the 2000s when
90s,
you guys?
90s.
Yeah. So, but there's, it's kind of just really looking at all of it and making considerations, and that's what the plan's saying too. It's not saying do this, you need to do this. It's saying consider this, so that when the time comes, potentially, the airport says, hey, we really want to get rid of this land. We think that we can really do something good with this, and bring in the type of housing that we'd like, what have you. The master plan allows you to be flexible enough to do a deep dive analysis into that and make those changes.
With the understanding, though, that the master plan has to plan not only for the future, but also has to take into consideration the folks that already live on the island.
Right.
Right. And, just listening to John, I think, and I'm not putting words in John's mouth, but he was almost looking at there's these tweaks that we could do, Macomb, ancillary dwellings, whatever it might be, that those tweaks might be beneficial, right? I look at this master plan the way it's drafted. It seems like it's really big, broad brushstrokes, but at the same time, they're almost sometimes overreaching, right? So, and again, Mr. Chair, I know I'm going backwards and forwards, but I take a look at the goal that's presented in the master plan. It says past policies worked well at the time, but may no longer be needed. And you go, what's that mean? Like, it doesn't work anymore? Well, okay. It goes on to say, during the time of the prior master plan, there were concerns about the potential for Grosse Ile to become overbuilt beyond capacity. In 2000, Grosse Ile Township passed a residential overlay that applied to all residential land and prevented that build-out from happening by limiting lot splits. First of all, it didn't apply to all residential land on Grosse Ile, correct? Anything that was owned R1B, R1A, didn't apply to that, right?
Overlay district.
No, but it didn't apply. The zoning was there, right? So in R1B, the zoning's there, right? Does R1E sit on top of it?
Does not apply to anything that's not, if it's an existing lot, it doesn't apply.
Right, the lot's there, right, Brian? So the lot's there. If it's not, like, let's say we're going to the airport, where that would be an overlay district. I get that. This actually just says that it applied to all residential land and prevented the build-out from happening by limiting lot splits. That's not just the only thing it limited, right? Lot splits are one capacity of this. Potentially like an airport development, right? Macomb, I get it. But it seems like, John, and again, I'm not putting words in mouth, but are there things that we can do to help this cause now without taking this over approach, right? That you could see productive things happening, not in the future. It could happen, potentially this planning commission could address Macomb district in January.
Right.
Right, we could look at that.
That's the intent, yeah.
Well, that is the intent. So I think that makes sense, right? I think when I take a look at this plan, sometimes it seems like there's an agenda that's not really driven that directly. And I understand it's a guiding document. It's going to help us plan. I understand the purpose. I've sat through a few of these already. But I just think, when you listen, when you see John's analytics, and you think about what John Rathel is saying, I think there's a reason as to why we're here. We're trying to figure out what's good for not just people coming on the island, but the people that already live here.
Of course.
Right? So if you live on Oak River Drive and you have a nice house, do you want duplexes right behind you?
That's not what we're recommending, though.
But again, if you take a look at that, that's something that they want to come in and build duplexes there, right? We have to be concerned about people that want to move in those duplexes, but we also have to worry about the people that live in that residential community that we developed years ago, right? So that's all I have, John.
Okay. Just a couple of more slides. It might be useful. Slide on down. This is what I presented at the last meeting. We didn't have a chance to review it. This was simply looking at the unit area for the homes by size, the floor area, by size and count. And you can again see that the majority are in the 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, and that's R1B primarily. If you turn to the next page, look at the SEV distribution by count. You see 100 to $150,000. There's 1,016 homes in that group. And you can see the split as you move all the way out to homes that have an SEV all the way out to greater than 350,000. But I took the SEV for the 1,500 to 2,000 square foot homes because those are the majority, and that's what the scatter chart looks like for that particular range of floor area. And you see the line that runs right up the middle there is my eyeball of where that line actually runs, and the SEV on average is $150,000. And so again, you can find a few that are less. You can find a lot more that are higher. But if you're going to build in this size range on the island, this is where you're going to end up for an SEV, somewhere in this range, and it's not cheap. Okay, any thoughts on that?
I think again though we're focusing. I don't think that, at least my take on this whole process has never been that we're trying to build the next $100,000 home subdivision in Grosse Ile. Like, I think we're going way off track here. What we've been talking about is increasing the number of household or residential areas available to make available increases in population, because we need that to cover, as John, or as Kurt, I'm sorry, mentioned, in terms of, we have tax dollars that we need to cover. We have a bridge we need to cover. We have utilities. We have needs in the community. So what we were looking at is the difference between the current 10,500 or 10,700 and the 12,000 that we determined many years ago we were capable of handling. And I think this is all super valuable information, but I think, quite honestly, I'm getting a bit of analysis paralysis here. I think we're undoing a lot of the conversation with some of these facts and figures, because I don't think, and I mean, people in 20 to 29-year-old range right now are buying incredibly expensive tiny studio apartments in Detroit, in metro areas. We're not trying to compete with the $100,000 29-year-old starter home. We're looking to have make available unique and different types of homes, or diverse, not unique, diverse types of homes. Those 60 to 79-year-olds who want to live in those types of homes, then guess what? They sell their current home, and that opens up another home for the 30 to 35-year-old. I mean, we have to think about this in the broad sense, where what we're looking at doing to grow Zeal in the future. I'm not looking to downgrade anyone's home value by putting duplexes in their backyard. I think we will have a process to plan through all of that. I think we'll think through all of that. We'll have good, vibrant discussions on that. But I don't want to walk away from here this evening and say we have enough diverse housing to ensure that Grow Zeal is sustainable for the future. Because I'm telling you right now, mark my words today, if we do that, we will not be sustainable. We'll be having the same conversation in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We need to plan for the future and what that looks like.
Just through the chair, John, I guess asking Angela the question, from what these analytics show, there is a diverse portfolio of houses on Grow Zeal. What am I missing?
I'm asking for more. I'm asking for an increase in houses available. 200 doesn't seem like much. I think we need to increase our tax revenue on this island. We need to increase the vibrancy of the population on this island to ensure that our schools are successful, that our businesses are successful, that we have the tax dollars to continue to pay for the services that we all have come to expect and require. I am not in any way suggesting that we throw a bunch of low cost housing in people's backyards. I think we need to plan it well. I think Macomb Street is in dire need of more mixed housing available. I've said that for a long time. That shouldn't be any big surprise. It sounds to me like John has some thoughts on the airport land as well. I don't see us entertaining a huge developer coming in and throwing up one subdivision with 200 new houses and being inundated with developers coming to Grow Zeal. What I see is just being more flexible, being more nimble, giving ourselves and our community the options to be flexible and nimble in the future going forward, so that we can add those when we see fit.
One thing that I've heard this come up several times is population decline. Population decline, that's something that affects, baby boomers are passing away and we're no longer having 4.5 kids. That's something that affects every community. Grow Zeal, Wyandotte, Trenton, all the surrounding communities, with exception to like Brownstown. If you went to look at SIMCOG data, that's what you'd find. They all have decreasing population. We just simply don't have the children that we had in the past. So I think if anything, the population on Grow Zeal is probably more stable than other surrounding communities. There's still houses being built. There hasn't been no major decline in the population on the island.
Yeah, and I'd just like to make a comment as well, is we're the best thing downriver, right? People still aspire to come here. We're not
say it's the best place in Michigan.
It's the best place in Michigan, Kurt said. Except the numbers up there, Grosse Pointe Farms and everything are, Yes. So, we have that draw, right? If we maintain the uniqueness, the rural setting, the opportunities that we do have here, people do come over and fix their homes up, right? And I get what Angela's saying. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I have, kids that want to move into a house that is all done, right? They don't have time. They both work. I mean, Angela is 100% correct. But I think, though, that I don't think we're in a situation where we're going to fail of attracting people to come to the island. It's very unique in its geographical location. But with that, and Angela and I have talked about this a lot, is we do have to have the ability to recognize opportunities when they come, right? And Angela, I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And I don't think anyone
yeah.
is disagreeing with you on that, right? So when we look at, and Kurt had suggested, and I would be in favor of that in January, of passing something on the Macomb Street district, right? I mean, I think that's a low-hanging fruit. And I think that, the accessory dwellings or whatever address, of add-on, because I think there's add-ons and then there's separate dwellings on. I think that's a conversation to be had for sure. But I think that we're fine with everything that we're doing, except some of the language in this, like Kurt had read, is sounding like it's overreaching unnecessarily. And I'd like to see some of that language pared down, but maintain, the spirit of what you're talking about, Angela.
I would be in favor. I can understand the linguistics of it in terms of the opener. I will say that that's how it was presented to the consultants. I remember distinctly in some of these meetings, that was how it was explained to them. So I don't think that you work a lot more closely with them, but when I read it, Kurt, it was kind of like, okay, that was my understanding based on the inputs that were provided, and being an audience member listening in, that was exactly how it was presented to them, was that was put in place to halt growth. And so, while that may have made sense then, does it make sense going forward? And that was so
right,
maybe poorly written, but.
But take a look at, we all disappear, this master plan comes up in 8 years, brand new commission. We want to make sure it's done right. And we want to make sure that it addresses the concerns that we're talking about today, the community groups, Ross's input, Brian's input. We want to make sure that this document is a tool, right? And I think right now the tool just needs to be cleaned up and sharpened a little bit. And Brian, I guess getting back to my question, and I keep on using the word analytics, but clearly some of this has, or I think most of it has pertinence to what we're talking about today. How does it get bled into the master plan, if at all? Or how can it be bled into the master plan?
Well, there's a couple things. So you currently, all of your demographic analysis is in the appendix. So there's already 90 plus pages of analysis of different housing items, different population items, different income items, different education level items. So it's already in there. If you explicitly want these tables, these charts, you can simply incorporate it into what's already there.
Another exhibit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality. Now, I think the bigger picture, and this is something when we had our smaller session meeting that John J. Ross and Derek and I talked about, was really the putting it into the appendix is not a big deal at all. That shouldn't be an issue for them. It's just further analysis. I think the real question is, does any of this data alter any of the recommendations that are in the plan? Is any of it significant enough that it warrants reconsideration? If it does, that's a much bigger item to have to deal with. If it just lends support and credence to what's already there, then I think it can be blended in pretty seamlessly, and it doesn't necessarily change anything, I guess, is the reality.
Yeah, and I think it's good information to see, so that when you're looking at this planning document, again, the analytics of valuation of property, valuation of lots, valuation of buildability, I don't want it lost in the back of a document. I want it to be one of many sub-tools for this major tool when we talk about planning. So again, go ahead,
I
Ross.
guess I'm just because I think that you're stating that there was no analysis that was done. I mean, just because it's just presented in a different way, right? So the consultants already pulled all this and all the assessing data, and combined with the public input, combined with prior plan audits. I mean, there is a lot of. I mean, we're talking about over like a year and 3 months now, year and 4 months. I'm not even sure of them conducting these analyses to make their recommendations. So, I mean, if you would like for the community, so this community snapshot, I mean, they're mapping out land value. Like, they know where the hot spots are on the island. They know, it's all there. Like the sale, like recent sale values, data ranges from 1994 to 2024. It's all there. So it's just a matter of, do you want it in a specific section of the plan? Do you want them to be spread out so that it's more clear? Do you want?
Right,
I guess I'm just not understanding. Like, you're saying that it's broad ranging, but what points?
I'll give you an example. So in the plan on page 27, it says the state of land use, zoning, and development. It goes back to 2010, and it says there's 145 permits from 2010 to 2023. Recognizing this is a 10-year plan, I get that. But really, it talks about the fact that the development on Grosse Ile has shifted over the last 15 years because of the ability to renovate single unit dwellings. I look at it and say, 2008, we went through a mortgage crisis, right? There wasn't a lot of building permits on Grosse Ile. I was around, right? I think I still potentially was an elected official in 2008. We had problems, right? No one was building, right? What John did is he went back and took a look at this a little bit farther back, right? To take a look at how the zoning districts and R1E work together, right? And you take a look at it and say, well, what happened in 2020? Well, we had a small COVID event. But what they quote is permits from 2010 to 2023. So 4 or 5 of those years were just bad years in general, right? So I look at this and say, only 145 permits over 13 years? That's nothing. It's not.
Right.
But that's not a really true analysis of what we're talking about. What John did, and again, I'm using John's data that we showed today, but he showed us a bigger stream of reality, maybe not going back to 1950s. I get that, right? But if you say 1980 through 2023, then I can kind of see how this is moving a little bit better. They picked and chose 4 or 5 of some of the worst years in anybody's city when it comes to development and use that as the model to say, it didn't work. It's not working. We need to do something different. So again, I'm not suggesting that we go back and change everything you've done. I know you put a tremendous amount of time in this. But when I look at this chart, I don't think this chart is actually, I don't think it's it's not fair to say it. I understand the property or the house size has gone from 4.5 down to 2.5. But Dan's right about that. That's for any community in this area, right? So how does that impact the way we plan for the next 10 years of this island, right? So I don't want to upset the cart of all the effort, but I think the analytic just kind of gives you a truer picture of the reality of it. And what we do with it is a whole nother question, right? I think that's what Brian's saying. How do we put it in the plan and use it for good recommendations moving forward? So that's my comment.
I think I want to make the point that maybe it's not reflected in the language or how it's interpreted, but I think what they were suggesting wasn't that it didn't work, it was that it worked too well. So we did have a small number of permits pulled during that time, and if we're going to compare to Trenton, Wyandotte, Flat Rock, like we have, I would, this is I'm guessing, but I would love for Tim to pull that same time frame for those particular communities during that same time frame and get a grasp on the permits pulled in those communities, because again, I know Flat Rock really well, And I would venture to say they probably had the highest number of permits during that period of time pulled, and a lot of growth, and and it's paid off in that community in particular, especially when you compare it to the 90s when I was there. So I think just like anything else, we have a lot of data available to us, and a lot of that data is left to interpretation. I'm gathering some of the language is maybe a little harsher, or the interpretation of it feels a little bit harsher, but I think it's okay to look at that and say we only had 100 and some odd permits pulled during that period of time, because that's what the goal was during that time. Right now, and looking at the next 10 years, I'm suggesting that's not the goal. Like, if we, in the next 10 years, if we had another 100 permits pulled, that wouldn't get us to that goal or that metric or whatever we're looking at in terms of increasing available housing.
But through the chair,
Just a comment on that metric, that 200 number, as a target for needed housing. That was based off of an affordability chart, okay, which in analysis was pulled. It was pulled from the master plan because it basically was false. Okay, what it was a calculation based on income that you have versus your housing cost. If your housing cost was more than 30% of your income, then it was considered too high, okay? And that meant that you needed to move into a smaller house in order to have a house that fit your
Correct.
30% income,
Yep.
okay? That is, and through that, they went all the way from people with less than $10,000 a year income all the way out to a house, a person that had a $500,000 house that was living, that it was unaffordable. Okay, so the logic of it was that somehow the township was responsible to provide housing for a person to match his income. Well, if the person can't afford to live there, change his priorities. Okay, spend his money somewhere else, or move.
Yeah, but we can't control that, John. What we can control are
But you don't-
attracting people who want to move here or continue to stay here and can afford and spend their money so that we can continue on the same path with the services. I understand what you're saying, but just like your interpretation of those metrics and that data is similar to using this data. I mean, every number can be pulled and pushed in different ways to tell different stories and different values. I think the metric was just something that we needed a starting point. When we asked to do the master plan or we look at it, there was a push and an ask of the consultant group to find areas and ways that we could increase the number of houses available, increase the revenue opportunities in the township, and that's what they produced for us. So, how do we look at that and reconsider the plans that we have in place? I think that's the bigger question.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and that's what John and Kurt were saying. It's about picking your targets. Okay, you don't set a goal, I want 200 more houses, and I want 2,000 more people on the island. That's not the goal. For me at least, neither one of those is the goal. My goal is to look for the specific niche uses where we know we have a key need, that we know we can match it such that whatever gets built or whatever gets approved matches not only the need of specifically the age group, for example, that we're trying to target, but also the population, the people that are living around it.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a balancing act, and and so I don't look at that 200 number as being even meaningful. It isn't to me. I say we pick our targets like Macomb Street and work on them, and whatever how it evolves, from there is how it evolves. It's okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think another aspect of why they kind of brought this concept of affordability. And so I think there's this also thing that's kind of going on here. We're correlating smaller homes with low income homes, right?
Right.
And that's just not true. When we're talking about affordable homes, we're talking about affordable homes to the islanders, based off of the median income of the island, and which is approximately $125,000 per household. So when we're talking about affordable homes, we're talking about for this community. We're not talking about for Trenton, for Wyandotte, for Flat Rock.
I've understood it as affordable homes, period, and that's what would attract the younger 20, 30-year-olds.
Oh.
We're not looking to attract wealthier 20, 30-year-olds. That's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean,
we're looking to construct homes that fit the existing character of this island, but just different styled homes, but the same quality homes that exist here today. So that's one aspect, and I forgot the other.
So Ross, let me ask you a question
So
then. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's creating. So it comes down to you really got to explore the definition of affordable. Then, if you're not using the broad term affordable that everyone thinks out of every community, we're using the affordable term for Grosse Ile. So you really got to define that.
Yeah, it's 30% of the median income of the island.
No, it's 30% of what was in that table was 30% of the breakdown of incomes. Whether it was 150,000 or whether it was 300,000 or whether it was 10,000. In each case, there was a certain percentage of homeowners in each of those income groups that could not afford, according to this definition, the house they were living in. And so therefore, if that counted as one, that meant that we should have a house that was available to them to move into that would be affordable. That table was, in my opinion, ridiculous.
but it's pulled, right? It's not in there any longer. Okay, so then we don't need to worry about that ridiculous table. But I do think if we need to double click on understanding what we mean when we are talking about, entry level, lower income, however we've been referring to these, maybe we need to, agree upon the correct verbiage so that it's understood we're not looking to put up a bunch of $100,000, homes and for,
Well, I
families
think
of six or whatever.
That's what John's data proves, right? I mean, like the land values
Right.
and the cost of construction on the island
Right.
doesn't allow for that.
Well, he's showing with his data that just because it's a smaller home, it's not what people in general have as a more affordable home. He proved that with the data that there isn't these 1,500 square foot affordable homes out there. They're not really on there. There may be a few exceptions, but for the most part, they're not on the island.
Yeah, I mean, it's if we're looking at homes in the value of like the $280,000 to $350,000 mark. I mean, that's probably what could happen, could work. I mean, and going all the way up to $450,000 or $500,000, you can make a beautiful quality home on a small lot. That's a quality home. It doesn't have. When we think of small homes, we're not thinking about across the bridge over there, and where it's trailer parks. That's not what we're talking about here, and that's been lauded a couple of times. That we're considering trailer parks and we're considering low income apartments for whoever, and that's just not. This is simply not the recommendation that's being made here. Although some people might. I could understand why you might think that's what's being recommended, but that's just not. It's just allowing us to be flexible for a variety of housing types. And actually, what I remember now is that's part of that bill is signed into law now. That's a requirement under the Michigan Planning Enabling Act that you have to include a variety of different housing types in a master plan. And I think that some people thought that when they read this, it sounds like there's an agenda here, but actually it's a part of the law. It's part of Michigan law that it has to be included.
Again, through the chair, I recognize that, Ross. When I say agenda, again, we want to use this as a tool to help this commission, your department, and future commissions down the road. We just want to make sure that it's something that can be used productively, right? So when I said agenda, and it's not just wordage, when I read Grosse Ile is one of the wealthiest communities in Wayne County with more community members making more money annually than regional counterparts. I'm not even quite sure why that's in there. Really, what I'm saying is the tone of it is that somehow then to list what the average income from our community to Gibraltar to Wyandotte to Wayne County, it looks like there's disproportion, and that has been the way since my parents moved from Allen Park to Grosse Ile, right? The reality is you have to list it there, but there's almost a tone to it like there's something wrong with Grosse Ile, right? And when you take a look at affordable homes, one of the ideas is that modular homes. Could we use modular homes? Well, again, let's say John is in a subdivision and they are all stick-built, brick-built. Should there be a modular home built right next to his?
There is already on
No, no,
Manchester, I know of.
I'm just saying that, is that something that in this master plan that we should allow? Should we allow that moving forward? How about if it's not a modular, if it's a mobile that's converted into a modular or a real, I mean, we just have to plan so that his housing value isn't impacted as well. So if we have to do it and we make a recommendation, we do it, makes sense. But we need a tool that can be used for the next planning commission.
Right.
Right? And again, there's some of the stuff in here, it just seems like there is an agenda, right? And it's a tone. So I've done this more, I got appointed to Planning Commission in 91. It's 2024 right now. So I've seen a few of these. This one has more tone than those in the past. And again, maybe it was the consultant, maybe it was the groups that sat down. Maybe that's the way we want to go. But we want to make sure it's an effective tool.
Jay, you've been awful quiet there, sir. I'm sure you've been over there thinking about this.
Yeah, everybody's wondering why.
Genius.
Is there anything more to say?
Yeah, right.
I did what you told me to. I called you a genius. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that part. No, I don't want to jump ahead in the agenda, but we were asked to look at the implementation steps, right?
Yep.
And as I looked at those, most of them, almost all of them, there were a few that I would change, but they do use the term consider, right? And I think that was a change that we had asked for in a previous meeting. And the idea is that, when we consider ordinance changes, we've sat down in the past and said, okay, what else could we do? And we've considered a bunch of things, brought them back to the Planning Commission and said, okay, here's a list of 12 things that we've come up with. There are things that we could do. What are people interested in pursuing? And then the Planning Commission would give input, potentially have a vote, and then we would go back, work it into a draft ordinance, bring it back, have consideration from the commission, and through that process, move things forward or decide, okay, this commission is not in support of whatever that action was. And so, I see the implementation steps, to the extent they say the word consider, as creating that list of things that we should sit down and decide, is this something we want to spend time on right now, right? Is it important enough, and is it the thing that we want to devote time to right now? And so if we take it in that, and understanding that some of them may get implemented in some form or another, and some of them may not, I think at least with respect to the implementation steps, it seems reasonable, right? We'll consider these things as long as people don't understand or don't assume that because it says consider, we're going to do it, right? And we're going to do it either the way it's worded or in some form we're going to do something with this, right? It may be that this commission considers it and says that's not something we want to do. And if the township board thinks that we should and we don't want to, then they can move us out, right? Bring in somebody else who's going to implement what they want to do. But I think the point is we are appointed to this commission to consider things like this. And frankly, there are some of the things here where I looked at it and I said, yeah, we should probably do that. But I still like the word consider because it's not what I want to do, right? It's what the commission wants to do. And there are some things that I look at on there and I say, we can consider it, but I'm pretty darn sure the answer is going to be no. But it might be worth the hearing, right? The vetting of it and going through the whole process. So my concern is that by putting it on here and saying consider, that 3 years from now people will come back and say, you guys didn't do your job. You were supposed to do all these things and you didn't do any of them, or you only did a third of them, or something like that. As long as that word is respected, I'm fine with it. And we may have some frustrating conversations, but it's been a while since we've had frustrating conversations around here. So, you know what I mean? I think the accessory dwelling units are a good example, right? I think on their face they seem pretty fine, but I can sit here and think of, well, what if people put up tiny homes that they can buy buy from Walmart.com, put it in their backyard, and then they use it as an Airbnb. Or they use it for a rental unit or things like that. How do we police that? And once we allow them, so on its face, maybe it's fine. Maybe there's a way to regulate it. Maybe there's a way to police it. But that's the sort of thing that only gets really figured out through the process. And then in that process, we can say, okay, we're supposed to consider, an ordinance change that would allow more options in multifamily housing. Well, we can sit down, we can look at the whole map of the island, and we can say, okay, where might that make sense? Whether that's Macomb Street only, whether that's the Meridian School infill. We can look at those things and determine where that makes sense. And I think it'd be a lot of work for us to say, okay, we're going to consider all those things. But, on their face, fine, these are all things we can consider. Having said that, I'm like I said, I'm not, there's many things on here I'm not in support of, but I'm in support of spending the time to vet them and determine whether, there's limited applicability of some of them, or broad applicability to some of them.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make another.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Just real quick comment. I think, Jay, when we move forward and we say we're going to consider, and we have this plan, 3 years down the road, it was implemented, and that word "consider" is not going to be respected. It was passed. This is what it is. But then, like we said, if the township board wants to do it, they can get rid of all of us and implement it. For me, I think the root problem is when we talk about affordability. All right, what is the definition of affordability? Right, we hear that, and everybody that I have spoken to on this talks about how this master plan is going to address a whole influx of people coming to the island with lower property values than what we're at now, okay? To bring people that currently can't afford it with no extra increase of their revenue, but a decrease in our property values to allow them to come in. And that's where this comes from, right, is the affordability. We need to have affordable housing, okay? Where Groseal has always been, no, you have to be able to afford a house on Groseal. Right, and that's a big difference, right? You need to afford a house on Groseal. It's not up to Groseal's planning commission to make housing affordable for you. The market is going to dictate what the value of these homes are. And this plan does not make that clear. That's it. I think we all agree. I think I know Angela agrees. We talk, okay, Angela does not want to lower the values of homes on Groseal. Okay, she owns one here, all right? She doesn't want to lose her value of her house, and she's going to be here for a long time. But it's not clear, it's confusing, and it's emotional. That's the problem that I see that exists.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is that something that can be addressed? And if so, how? Ross? Well, does the commission agree with John's comment?
I mean, I think some of these caveats can be easily understood if we just, can we just create in the appendix a definition of the terms used? It's not uncommon for like contractual work, like as we refer to this word, this is exactly what the definition of that means. And if the word affordable is throughout the plan, I don't think that it is. I don't think, is it?
Affordable is stated 3 times in the plan, and that's in the implementation section, to where if somewhere down the road we ever wanted to, there's a HUD
An option.
program.
Okay.
There's grants.
Yeah.
That's the
I
only-
feel
there's
like
not-
this is the most conversation we've had about affordable, in quotes, is tonight. I don't, I think, I don't know. Again, I think about, I moved from Plymouth. I lived in Plymouth for 12 years, and they saw a similar need. They wanted to attract more people to this vibrant downtown. They took they had the opposite, where they had little tiny lots and little tiny houses, and they enabled people to build homes that worked for them on those tiny lots. I'm not suggesting that Groseal looks like Plymouth, but it worked. It worked too well in the opposite sense, because the housing values drove up so significantly in the last 10 years. But what it also did, because they were trying to attract those young families, they actually attracted a higher population of retired folks, because they want to go where it's, active and walkable and cool, and they have more options, and they have less lot or less home. It's not about degrading the value of Groseal. I'm not at all interested in that. I'm not at all interested in making Groseal appear like any of the other communities. I mean, the suggestion I always make too, why do we always compare to only the cities that are just across the bridge? The majority of people I've met here have moved from Dearborn, Allen Park, Northville, Plymouth, Canton, South Lyon. I don't all that often. I mean, it's not obviously impossible, but it's just everybody doesn't live in Flat Rock and then move to Groseal like I did. I bounced around to a lot of different places, and we landed here and selected Groseal for very specific reasons. So, it's not everything is as it seems in these charts. And I think, again, we can simplify the discussions on confusion around these terms by just defining them. And if there are specific terms, then, we look at it in that sense. But I think overall, I don't have any issue with the plan.
I guess just going back to what Ross said, John's idea of affordability, where does it talk about? You're right, it doesn't say it specifically. When you take a look at housing objectives as part of this, number one is expand housing choices to make Groseal Township a desirable place to reside for a wide range of age groups, and then to promote and streamline desired residential developments missing or under-provided in the market. That's kind of what it's saying, right?
Not at all.
No,
Not at all.
No, it is, because I'm telling you right now, if you take a look at John's analytics, that's where we get back to it. He's telling you that there's property values that are around $300,000. We have 1,700 units that are less than 2,000 square feet, and then we have those that are greater than 2,000 square feet. When you take a look at these objectives, tell me what under-provided in the market is. What is not provided in our marketplace on Groseal?
So the folks.
Wait, let me just ask a
Okay.
question. Under 2,000 square feet or greater than 2,000 square feet? What's not provided? Taking out Macomb and taking out ancillary dwellings. What's not provided?
Exactly that. I mean,
Those two things, right? So I get back to that statement that this is driven by saying, what? Make it clear. Make it clear so it's a planning tool so that it's clear from the start to the back end of it. If that's what we're looking at, John said niche. I think he said niche, right? The idea of airport, Macomb, ancillary dwellings. If that's what this master plan's focus is, then let's make it very clear that's what it is. But then when you take a look and say that we want to provide those units for a wide range of age groups, that's where that analytic comes in again. 20 to 29, is that what we're focusing on? Is it 30 to 35, 30 to 40? Is it the 80 plus? So again, I think this plan is good. It's there. The question is, how do we use it productively for the island?
when we look at future zoning changes, this master plan would allow us to do a deep dive analysis into those sorts of things. Like what are the market demands? What are those things? And that's what you can look into in a future zoning change. This master plan just is basically enabling us to make those changes in the future. based off of those future analyses.
I agree. And so when you take a look at the index that Brian talked about and the appendix, there's a lot of information there. There's no doubt this planner did their job, right? What John did is he kind of brought it down into a graph so that when we do future land use and review, we can see that we do have a wide range of diverse properties on Grosse Seal. We can see that, well, you can nod it off, but I'll tell you, I read the appendix and it was more confusing for me. These charts are much more clear for myself, and it's not to suggest that I've never seen these before. It's never, I mean, I've done a little planning on Grosse Seal. So how do we use that information productively? The appendix are good, but to hide it in the appendix doesn't make any sense to me, right? So does it make sense what Angela's saying? Let's define what affordability is. I guess we could do that, right? But I think it helps us be productive in the use down the road. So again, we're not turning this thing backwards. All the time and effort you put into this, Ross, I think somehow you think that there's like a push, like we're gonna start this process all over again. I just want to make sure that when it leaves our hands, goes to the township board's hand, and it goes out there and you put it in a great, it's codified, and then you can use it for all your grants, that it's reality, right? And right now, I'll give you one other example that I think is great. It talks about implementation, expanding housing choices to make Grosse Seal a desirable place for residents for a wide range of age groups. It says, further explore how the R1E overlay can be updated to meet the resiliency needs of the island without hindering development in appropriate locations. How about you spin it the other way? How about you say that it needs of island so as to aid development in appropriate locations? Why don't you use it as a tool, right? But why put it in the negative without hindering? My thought is that you want to explore how it can be used to aid in the development, right? So you look at that, and Angela's going to say, well, that's semantics. Well, maybe it is semantics. Maybe it is. But maybe there's a way that we can use it productively, right? So
I think that's what it's recommending. I mean, I guess I'm
just reading what they recommended in implementation. I read what they said, right? That's not what I agree with you. I think it can be used positively.
One thing on affordable too, the word may only come up a little bit, but in the sections we were asked to review, right here under creating more housing types, it says to identify additional potential financial barriers to development. Financial barriers, they're basically another way of saying how can we make houses more affordable, and they're suggesting smaller houses, smaller lots. So I think we're talking about it, but again, we keep bringing up that, we haven't identified ways to bring affordable house on the island. Nobody's done it yet because smaller homes and, I personally think, smaller attached like apartment style homes can bring someone who's a little bit lower income. I'm not saying low income as assistance. I'm saying lower income. But again, you need a developer to bring that style home, a developer to bring that to the island. Individual person is not going to build a 4-unit building.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been at this for a while. Eric, I'd like to get any thoughts you have
Yeah, no, just a couple of things. So, I mean,
before we take a break.
where are we at? Well, if you want to take a break, that's fine. Are we taking a break for the evening or taking a break for the break for 5 minutes?
I don't know.
Eric's about to make a motion right now.
Is that a hint?
No, if we're going to take a 5-minute break, then let's do that, and then we'll come back. But if we're going to take a bigger break, then I'd like to talk first.
I'd say we're going to come back for a few more minutes.
Okay. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back.
Okay. 5-minute break, folks. Eric, your thoughts, please, on what you've heard?
Yeah, no, I mean, good spirited debate. Not even spirited. I think just a good debate overall. It sounds like we're maybe in more agreement than disagreement. And my real question is, what are the next steps, right? I mean, we've got a couple questions on some tone, some specific verbiage, some definitions, and then implementation, right? So we've got the plan here, but what's next? Do we wordsmith this, or is this the consulting group saying, no, take this or leave it?
Well, no, it's definitely not that.
Okay.
I mean, we do not approve this until we're happy, as a majority of this planning commission, that we're happy with it. Okay, and during the break, Jay had a particularly genius comment, sir.
Really?
Come on.
It's called payback.
Now two geniuses at this planning
right.
commission.
No,
Payback's your help.
specifically, perhaps about tone versus the action items. And Jay, could you speak to that again?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about the tone, I think some of the concern is, even if the words specifically aren't things that we would disagree with, I think if the tone suggests, for example, that we are going to push to implement affordable housing, right? In the sense that affordable is typically used, meaning, below a certain, dollar value, which is below what we have currently. That if that's the tone, and then we adopt what I had suggested earlier of, we're going to consider these things, and we may decide not to do them. Somebody could come along later and say, wait a minute, I read this thing, and the tone of this is you're going to do these things. And then you guys haven't done any of that. And so what we want to, that's where the tone can matter, because somebody can read it and say, look, I read this, and this suggests that you're going to do lots of things. This is what the Planning Commission and the Township Board adopted, and you're not doing these things. And so we want to make sure that the tone matches the intent that we have at the time, which is we're going to consider these things. These are all things that are worth considering. This is the data that we're observing, and it's causing us to review these things for these reasons. And we may or may not do these things, but it's in keeping with trying to accomplish the goals of, keeping people on the island, the goals that we all can agree on, I think, for the most part. And so that's why some of that tone, matters. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Is that the genius?
That was the genius part.
Everybody's underwhelmed by the genius at this point.
I wasn't going to say anything about that.
They're not sure that word means what we think it means.
Sure. Yeah. I guess that's moving forward in terms of editing or making any amendments to the plan to sort of address that issue. It would mostly be my department working and editing this draft, making any edits moving forward. So any sort of specific, areas of the plan and that need to be wordsmithed would be helpful, just so that we can make those edits. So I mean, I know we're going to go through the implementation section right now, but as far as anything else in the plan, it needs to be specifically called out, and so that we can make those edits.
Okay, well, I think there are a couple of generic things that we've heard. The first is the tone of both the action items and in the document itself should be from a positive perspective, not a negative perspective, and that's just that makes for a better document. But then the second element of that is that the tone cannot be more, the tone in the write-up cannot be more definitive than the tone of the action item. In other words, you don't say on the one hand, you really need to do this, and then just say consider on the outside, because then what Jay says is right. If you don't do it, well, you already said you needed to do it. So anything that ties to the action item should be of the same phrasing, or so it's reflected as a potential need, okay? But it's not defined as set in concrete. And that's just a matter of just reading through the document and looking for these things with that sort of sensitivity in mind. And I think also, what I heard, a very clear definition, a better definition of our goal. What Mr. Ratho was talking about with respect to, the idea here is we want people to live on the island who can afford it. And not the vice versa. We build housing to bring people that can't afford it currently. That's an important point, I think. And then Kurt's point, which he stressed, was that, this master plan, it has to be very clear up front. We're trying to meet multiple goals, but we don't sacrifice the people that are living on the island and their property values or their lifestyle or anything to accommodate something else. It's got to be a win-win. And I don't think that's what this report says right now. That's not the way I read it. Okay, and that's just me. But I think that with a better focus on perhaps the housing goals, the focus on the neighborhoods, those sections, as well as bringing it forward and putting in an executive summary. The executive summary should be rock solid. Okay, without any ambiguity, about what we expect to accomplish from this thing, and I think there's room for improvement there. So those are the things that I've caught in the course of the discussion. Are there others that anybody else would like to consider or disagree with me on?
I want to actually add on to what Eric was asking. So it's my understanding this is available to the public. How are we gathering feedback and input, and have we received any as of yet? And will those be used in the edits as well?
So we've received 12 comments so far, all online. It limits you to 255 words, but then we included an opportunity for folks to drop a PDF file in there if they have a long write-up. So we have 2 of those right now. A lot of them, so it's kind of interesting because it appears that there's one person making the same comments. So I've now limited it to where you have to provide us your name. So because it's pretty much 8 comments that are just, the paragraph is just mixed around, and it's a negative. It's a negative on the plan, basically saying like don't allow low income families to move to the island, those sorts of things. This plan doesn't represent Grosse Ile, those sorts of things, which I mean I with, but we will, when it comes to the public comment period, once we have the hearing, we will have all those comments up and we'll go through them and accept them or deny them.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could, so procedurally, the way it would typically happen is at the end of the public review period, all the comments would be compiled into a document, a form, whatever, provided to the commission, and then really the opportunity is any comments you receive during that time, whether it's from the public, whether it's from the county, whether it's from adjacent communities, they're all advisory. There's nothing that requires you to do anything other than accept them. But typically what you would do is go through, evaluate them, and see if as a whole, the commission feels like there are changes warranted based on the input you receive during that review period. So if you do, then you can go ahead and incorporate those changes and just sort of proceed from there. But that's kind of the way it'll go, is it should be all compiled for you all to then make a determination whether you think a change is warranted based on comments that you received during this review period.
Okay. Ross, is that enough general direction for you, at least as far as the document itself is concerned? And we're going to get into specifics now of the action items. And there can be some specific wording changes which we can define. So are we ready to start on action items? I would suggest that, when our meeting started at 7:30, we agreed that we would stop at 10 p.m. Now that our meeting is starting at 7, I think that we should agree that the meeting stops at 9:30. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. Then we'll go as far as we can on this and proceed from there.
Can I just ask a quick?
Oh, please,
Just
yes.
a question. So, believe me, I'm in favor of stopping at 9:30 as well. But does that delay the process for you all? I know we have a certain amount of time to. So what is that? Yeah.
Well, it sounds like I have to review 153 pages of this document anyways and make some changes. So it doesn't matter. I mean, we're going to be meeting. A couple of us will be meeting in a couple of weeks, and then we'll have another meeting in January. I mean, it's just a matter of if this plan is adopted in February, January, March, whenever, we'll just keep plugging away at this. So if we don't finish this implementation section, we can just pick it up where we left off at the next meeting, or, I present it out to you guys again, and then if there's no edits, if I don't hear of any edits back, it's whichever way the commission wants.
Is there anything to be said that we're done for tonight? And then we, with clear minds, start with the implementation, because obviously that is the most important component of this, right? We talk about wordage, we talk about tone, agenda, but these are really the most important components of this tool. Does it make sense that when we're all fresh with it, we actually knock out the entire list? And again, I'm not trying to push this off through the chair, but is it that imperative that it's done tonight at 10 after 9?
You're right there. The ones that we really need to really review are the objectives specifically on land use and housing and Macomb Street.
Right.
Okay. Once you get past that, it's the
Agreed.
Planning Commission where we're listed as a resource. We're not listed as the driver, so to speak, and it's for other groups to critique it where they're in charge. So I think there's a valid point. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a little tired. You suppose we could reconvene on this?
It's fine with me. I mean, to be honest with you, I was having a hard time getting past the first H1.
Okay. All right. Can we look at the calendar then and see what things look like for dates for January?
January 6th, I believe.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, your regular meeting would be the 6th, the first Monday. We do have one development review that we are anticipating to present that evening to you as well. So,
A special land use?
It is, correct. Special land use and site plan for a project at Commerce Park. Existing building, no real change to buildings. It's just a new use. So I don't, knock on wood, I don't anticipate that will take a significant amount of time, but we will need to get through that so that process can move along and not slow them down. So I think with a 7 o'clock start, I think we can get into implementation and still be able to knock it out in that same meeting. Especially, I think if in the interim, if the goal is for Ross to kind of wordsmith some of this, give him an opportunity to go through it potentially. I don't know if you want to do that and send it back out before the 6th, or if you want to, I don't know. I don't know the best mechanism. I guess all I'm saying is I think we will have some time, and you could certainly add on a special meeting or a second January meeting if you don't get through the entirety of it.
I do not believe that one more meeting will be adequate to get through these action items. So, we'll get as far as we can get on the 6th. How does the 6th look to everybody?
That's fine, but just going on what Brian said, I don't think I would be looking for Ross to give us a new document before the 6th. With everything going on, my thought is we work on this as a continual versus giving us a new document. Holidays, everything else, I don't think you need to work on that right now.
The implementation section's ready to go. I mean, we can review that whenever, so.
But all the
January
other,
6th,
but your 153 pages that you have to, I don't think, I'm not looking for that to be revised prior to our next meeting.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I quite agree. Again, the initial push on this was to get the approval by the prior board, okay? When this whole project started 15 or 16 months ago, that was the idea, but it became very clear that wasn't practical. Once you get past the election and have a new board in place, there really is no time limit that's critical to us. We need to progress on it. We need to, move forward. But, whether it hits the township board in February or hits it in April, it doesn't really matter. Okay? All right.
Just,
So,
Mr. Chair, if I could just real quick too, just kind of scrolling through this on my own right now. I mean, it does seem, I think the majority of the planning commission matters are related to the zoning matters, obviously, and those really are all of the orange recommendations, the housing items. I mean, maybe if you try to split this up, if you don't think you're gonna be able to get through it in one meeting, maybe just concentrate the focus on the housing objectives and the strategies, and then perhaps a second meeting to then get into the rest where planning commission is potentially a little less involved, even though there's going to be a lot more to it. You can probably get through it pretty quickly, it'd be my guess.
okay, well, we will see. It just depends on how much discussion is generated. Just one more point. Brian Pollack couldn't be here tonight. He did provide some input, specifically with respect to resources that he suggested be added to some of these action items. Ross has got that list, and we'll look to incorporate his thinking into this as well. I wanted to make sure that was clear. Also, Ross, if it would help if you do redraft certain sections, okay, use the edit tool so we can see what's changed. It's a lot easier for us to find it and evaluate it if that tool is in place.
Yeah, and every edit that will be made in this plan will be reflected in the document. So every every sentence that I change will be reflected in the document. It will show my changes.
Excellent.
The final product. So.
Okay. Is there anything else that we can do to help you in way of guidance or direction?
Nope. I think I'm gonna give my best crack at it.
Okay. And again, like Kurt said, there's no fire on this. Take your time and let's just move it forward.
Well, John, we have to provide a little bit of commentary to him as well, right? He's not doing this blind, so anybody on the commission that has thoughts or concerns as to what they read, they need to raise it with him, right? Because, I mean, I think Ross in concept is pretty content with the language, right? We're saying we don't like the language, so we have to provide some direction to him, right? He can't, I mean, right now, if you'd say start working on it tomorrow, he's going to sit at this computer and go, I think that looks good.
No, I understand where you guys are coming from on this. I just like your example with the R1E, amending R1E, flipping that, making, having a positive
right.
On it. I'm going to try my best, but if it's something that, if you think that it could go a little bit further, then we'll just keep working it out that way.
You don't mind taking any of your comments?
No. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts on this meeting? Angela, let's start with you.
No, I think I shared plenty of thoughts, but thank you for the opportunity.
No more comments this time.
Eric.
No.
Jay.
No, I think I've said enough.
You've been genius enough.
Kurt?
I'm good. I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is exactly the way the master plan is supposed to be processed. Where we chew it up, look at the pieces, see what comes out, and end up with a document that we can all be proud of. So, good job, everybody. Thank you very much. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.